Dum dum dee dum dee dum 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 dum. Hello and welcome to episode 65 of the Good Guy podcast with me, Vittorio Angelone. That was very professional, wasn't it? Wowzers. Um, Welcome back. I didn't do a solo podcast on Monday, so and I still don't want to talk by myself, so I won't be monologuing excessively at the start of this podcast. You will be glad to know. I will plug all of the various things. If you're new to the channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hello, welcome. It's lovely to see you. If you're new on iTunes or Spotify or Soundcloud or any of the other platforms that it ends up on, hello, welcome. Hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button on YouTube because what fucking difference does it make to your life? Hello, click, easy, my day, made. What more do you want? Subscribe on iTunes, leave us a little 5-star review. That's more than a click, but it is within the realms of 30 seconds of effort from you. And again, the reviews make my wee day, especially if you leave a little comment and just say, hey man, this was good podcast. So yeah, do that if you fancy, and subscribe there and check out other episodes that you like the description of. And this is a Friday podcast. This will be released on Friday, the something of July. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I have the comedy podcast with my friend Ishan Akbar, doing new material with fantastic comedians from all around the world in lockdown, so because we just don't have anywhere to bring the new material. So you'll hear the kind of inside scoop on how comedians get from idea to a joke to a story to an extended bit to a callback, all those kind of things. And just if you're into comedy, I would recommend it, and it's a good insight for people who want a little peek behind the curtain. And it's funny. It's just genuinely entertaining if you're not a comedy dork. So this episode is with Athena Kugblenu. She's fantastic. I loved this episode. I thought it was a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it and felt like I was challenged by it and kind of educated by it for sure. But I thought it was a very good conversation, and I was very pleased with all the wealth of topics that we managed to cover in such depth and honesty and kind of sincerity. So I hope that comes across. I think it does. I think it was really enjoyable. And yeah, if you really enjoy my podcast and are a regular listener, I keep getting the odd person jumping on the Patreon, which is really nice. Obviously, you have a big boost when you launch the Patreon, but yes, if you're kind of newer to me and the world of the Good Guy podcast, patreon.com/Vittorio Angelone. Check that out and donate as little as £1 a month. And it might seem like, sure, what's the fucking point of me donating £1 a month? But you're supporting me being able to make good stuff and great podcasts like this, and affording like equipment and lighting and all that kind of stuff when I get back to London. So yeah, jump on patreon.com/Vittorio Angelone. Like, listen, £1 a month to you means nothing, but if a bunch of people do it for me, it makes a big, huge difference to my life, and I can dedicate more time to making great podcasts, comedy, sketches, stand-up clips, all that kind of shit. So get on board there. Follow me on Instagram if you don't already, Vittorio Angelone. Twitter at @thatvittorio. I've been getting the old viral tweets on the go. Had a sketch get 22,000 views. That was exciting. And then getting a few likes on some little jokes on Twitter that I will hopefully explode out into stand-up at some point. I'm sure I will when stand-up exists again. So that's all I wanted to tell you about, I would say. Subscribe to all the places, like all the things, give me money. Basically it. And I hope you really enjoy this podcast with Athena Kugblenu. Give it up for Athena. And then I'll have just said something like, give it up for Athena, everybody. And then all the audience, like listeners, clap by themselves in their houses, I assume.
Cool. I assume so too. Why would
um,
he doesn't applaud a podcast. I applaud all
yeah. I remember there was a guy who got really annoyed at me because at one time in a solo podcast, I was like, I know you can't respond, but if you agree, just touch your nose. And then he messaged me being like, I can't believe you just made me touch my nose while listening to your podcast. But anyway, welcome to the Good Guy podcast. Athena, if for people who don't know who you are, I mean, I will do as a good a job as I can in the intro, introducing who you are in and summing you up in 3 sentences. But if you'd like to attempt to do that yourself.
I can do it unless I'm a comedian and I'm a writer. That's it.
Oh, that was sick. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so good.
Yeah. What else do you need to know?
Yeah, that's true. It's true. So how long have you been doing stand up now?
Oh, I started my stand up in 2012. So spring 2012 is when I done my first gig. I answer this question a lot, and I always say I started in 2012. I've been good since about 2015.
Okay, yeah. That's an important.
It's very important. When you start doing stand up, it's like when you go to medical school. Your first day of medical school, you ain't operating on no one.
Yeah.
A while. So it's and also I say it as a distinction because people who aren't familiar with the stand-up world in particular, sort of, they'll be like, oh God, 7 or 8 years. Like, no, it doesn't work that way at all.
Yeah.
Especially, it's not, so there's such a steep learning curve, and it obviously depends on your work rate as well, which mine was very low at the beginning. So, but yeah, I started in 2012, spring 2012, which feels like a long time ago now, because it was a long time ago.
Yeah, very much a different kind of world. So, like, particularly right now, you're like, God, what was 2012 like?
Right, yeah. Like, if only we knew that was the peak, that we kind of peaked in 2012.
Yeah, we were like, yeah, the Olympics.
If we'd known it would be all downhill, we would have kind of dined out on that a bit.
Well, does it almost feel like we believed the Mayan calendar thing and we just like absolutely gave all our energy to 2012, and then after that it's just
done everything in our power to destroy the world, so it happens as close to 2012 as it possibly could. So we didn't quite hit the deadline. It's like Crossrail, we'll get there.
We're doing it
a little bit late. Yeah, I think you actually were on spot with that commentary. Yeah, you're right on. Yeah, that sounds about right.
So what made you, everyone has a different answer and multiple answers, I'm sure, but what made you kind of get into stand-up? Were you a big fan before you started?
Yeah, I was. Possibly not the live scene. I wasn't really aware of the live stand-up circuit. I used to watch gigs at maybe Hackney Empire and hen party gigs at Glee and whatever. But I wasn't really that much of a consumer. But I used to watch a lot of comedy on videos and stuff like that. But I genuinely, I say this all the time, I genuinely got into stand-up because I thought it would make me rich. I'm not, and I just thought it did. It's a true story. I've said it loads of times. I'm so happy to say it. I looked at, there was like a Sunday Times rich list, and there were some people on it, and I think it must have been entertainers specifically, but it was a Sunday Times rich list or something, and there were comedians on it, right? And I just looked at them and I just thought, these guys are that rich, and they never made me laugh once. Like, literally. When I just thought, these people are the richest people in this country on top of that. Like, nah.
Yeah.
And people my whole life have been telling me I'm funny, and I'm sat here in this office in this fucking A-line skirt and a blouse. And I just thought, and at the same time, I was going through some financial things, as we all are, where like money would have been useful. And I just thought, like, one thing there's something, the trap we always fall into, and it isn't necessarily a trap because it does very well for people, but like the whole work hard and you get rewards isn't really true, because it all depends on the kind of work you do, and lots of political reasons and lots of reasons you're in control of and stuff like that. So if you really want to be like super rich and super wealthy, you have to take really powerful decisions that put you on that path. However, those decisions tend to be quite high risk. So it was, I genuinely saw comedy as a way to like, get, just, I guess not be rich, just to be more financially comfortable, especially living in London as well. I mean, the reality is in London, unless you're quite wealthy, you can't own property. That's just the reality, right? This is where I'm from. So that's where I started. And then on top of that, it had that foundation of just being told, everyone funny gets told they're funny, so that's why I started. I'm not rich, by the way. How did this story end? But not in money. If anything, like, I'm incredibly financially much poorer,
than
what I was doing. But I only quit my day job in November.
Oh,
I was working full time till I've just had a bit of a break because I had a daughter, but yeah, I was working, and actually I still have my contract. So you know, after the shit show is over, I'll probably go back to doing a bit of office work.
Yeah. And I think it's that I think a lot of comedians are feeling like, oh, are we ever going to feel stable enough again to
We were never stable. It's that, you know,
yes, yeah,
stand-ups were never stable. So this is the issue. We was never, if you just performed live stand-up for a living, that was never a secure way to make money.
yeah,
So you know, so even when times were good, so even now, night times are shit. So it's a horrible situation at the moment. Actually, I don't think we've really I don't think outside of the stand-up community, it's really been processed how devastating it is.
yeah. And I think that the like what you were saying about to reap the big kind of rewards, you need to be able to take those big risks. And I think something that is highlighted where people say, oh well, my parents like help me with this, but it doesn't make a difference to whatever. But it's like, but it allows you to take those risks without it really being a risk, because you've got a much higher safety net than a lot of people.
Yeah, I do think there's a little bit of not mythology, but I do think that is overstated in the comedy world. I don't think there's a bunch of comedians running around on their parents' money. I think there are some things you can have. So you might be able to live at your parents' house rent free, for
Yeah,
example, or they might help you with a job, a good day job. But I think that happens less than we think it happens more than it does. I don't think that it's that common. Most parents who are in that situation wouldn't want their kids to go fucking near stand up unless the parents themselves are creative. But
yes,
what I would say is that there are ways there are things that can happen that can make live stand up a less risk averse place. For me, it was keeping my day job, which I
yeah,
recommend everyone does.
yeah,
You know, keep your fucking day job. You know, work out, make your comedy life. The rewards are so shit anyway in comedy. It's not worth it. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
Just keep your day job. But also it's like we have podcasts, like extend your comedy brain to other things that can make you.
yes.
That's how I got into writing, for example.
And I think there's
Yeah.
a place for creative people in general, but more specifically comedians, with the kind of dawn of the Patreon world and the kind of people realizing that the government isn't going to support these people and the system isn't really set up to support these people. So people realizing, oh, I'm a fan of this person and I'd like them to be able to spend more time on their comedy. So I'm just gonna send them money once a month, and you can create a kind of freedom through that.
And you work for your people, you work for your fans,
Yeah,
you know, and you build your own audience. Especially because I think in this country more so than maybe others. I'm not familiar with other comedy markets, but I guess I'm comparing the UK with America, perhaps. There's a lot of skepticism about what people like, you know, and it's all fucking bullshit. Like what people like is what, you know, so broad and vast, and they like so many different various things. So just like bypass these people who don't want to take what they perceive to be risks and like
yeah,
put your stuff out there. And if anything, like most of my peers who've done really well have actually done really well off of building their own audiences, and then people have gone to them. You know, that's
yeah,
not a coincidence.
yes, yeah,
And it's a shame we have to do that. It'd be nice, you know, it's not, you know, I won't name names, but some people haven't had to do that. You know what I
yeah,
mean? They just get plucked out and stuck on a
yeah.
panel show and whatever. But at the same time, like, are they universally liked? They might have money in their bank account, but is the art they create great? What
Yes,
about
and this
is
I
their
was
craft
having this
brilliant? You
discussion
know,
with someone
so
recently where someone referenced a podcast. I can't remember which one, but they were like, oh well, it gets a lot of listens and subscribers, so it must be good. And I was like, no, 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 no,
uh,
no, no. That's like a big audience does not a good podcast make. Good art is not defined by how it is like received by the lowest common denominator necessarily.
or just fans. Like, if you just have a bunch of people who just like you and what you do, that's a really bad way to judge whether what you're doing is good. I've had it in comedies like, can you play any room?
Yeah,
You know, can you walk into any room, or do you need your crowd? And I think that's like the differentiator between like a good comic and like the greatest comics that will stand the test of time, be remembered forever. You know, those guys could walk into any room and just everyone is just floored. And
yeah,
it's undeniable. But don't get me wrong, like, you know, a lot of people have, they might play to their audience, but they also are very financially secure off of that.
yeah,
And that's, so I
yeah.
don't deny anyone that, but I think, you know, your chances of success in terms of getting into that place are so small anyway. Like, don't sweat it if someone's there and you're not. There's always going to be someone in the place you want to be,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, that never stops.
Yeah, so it's even forgotten how we got to this point. I've forgotten the question. Where am
I
I? Why? What's
don't
going
even
on?
know if I asked the question.
just going on and on.
um, so when you started, did you have like favorite comedians that you looked up to?
Yeah, I liked Patrice O'Neill. I
Yeah.
thought he was brilliant. I liked Pryor. I used to listen to him a lot. I liked Eddie Murphy. I liked Gina Yajoué. I tend to watch more like sitcoms when I was younger. So I watched a lot of like TV sitcoms in terms of like the British comedy that I liked. Chris Rock as well. Chris Rock was at a point. Yeah, there was a point where Chris Rock was really. I mean, we know there was that point where he was the greatest comedian in the world, but still not always right. But he was just really good at comedy.
Yeah.
So yeah, most of my references were kind of like American. I liked Felix Dexter. So most of my references were kind of American, and most of my British references were like sitcoms and like just funny TV shows. I like topical stuff. I like
Yeah.
but I wasn't like sorry.
Do you find that there is kind of a school of comedians in the UK who very much stick to that UK style, where it's like that kind of based around Edinburgh, and then there's a school of comedians who are very, very influenced by that American, like Patrice type of comedians?
It's really weird. I think. Do I find that a lot of comedians stick to the Edinburgh style? Yeah, because there's an obsession with going to Edinburgh and that being like peak comedy, which is really odd. Because when you see, I saw, oh God, I've forgotten her name. She's like an American comedian who's white, but she told me she was mixed race. I'd believe her. Curly hair, she slagged at Trump. Anyway, I saw her in Edinburgh, and she just was just an hour of jokes. It was just ridiculous. It was just a masterclass.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that, and I don't read papers and reviews. I don't know what they thought of her show, but I know for a fact that if someone British had done that, it would just be like 2 stars. You know.
Well, I know people, friends of mine, who did a show and it was like wall to wall laughs, and like when I went to see it, a woman nearly died in the front row. She like choked on her drink. She was like, ah.
Yeah.
It was like great. I was like, this is amazing. And then a review came out and it was like 3 stars. But the only bad thing it said about it was it just felt like an hour-long club set. And I'm like,
right, that's an hour-long club set. Do you know how hard it is
exactly
to stand up in front of a club, in front of a club audience for an hour?
Yeah,
it's hard enough for 20 fucking minutes, let alone an hour.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a reality here. There's a lot of people in Edinburgh who kind of maybe watch Edinburgh comedy, and they probably never watch stand-up at any other point in the year. And it's weird because when I talk about this kind of thing, I don't want to delegitimize what happens in Edinburgh.
No.
What's happening there is comedy, but it's not all of comedy. It's just a genre of comedy. And I think because and it never used to be that way, by the way. I mean, when it was the Perrier Awards, it was Ed Byrne and Jack Dee and all these really traditional stand-ups. I'm not sure why it became so theatrical and why it wants to distance itself from the stand-up that you all practice on a Saturday night. And it's hard for new stand-ups to know. So many new stand-ups think if I am good at comedy, I am good at Edinburgh, which is not true. You can bomb Edinburgh and be a brilliant comedian, right? You can do amazing at Edinburgh and be a shit comedian, sadly. But that's also up for interpretation as well.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is there's no, we're not really dealing with absolutes here. And I would love for the comedy and stand-up world in general to decentralize Edinburgh a bit, because it's sort of very inaccessible. Even though I've been up, it's a very inaccessible place, and it's a place if you go out with unrealistic expectations, you can get really angry and be angry for the wrong reasons and lose hope, blah blah blah. So it's the reality is it's. I'll tell you, so if you're a non-white male, you'll probably be more successful outside of Edinburgh. You know what I mean? So why go up there? Like someone like Judy Love. I went up to Edinburgh, Judy Love a few years ago because Judy's amazing. But I'm why would she go up to Edinburgh when she's not going to go there and be misunderstood? Do your own thing, run your own shows, work your own crowds, build your own audience, and bypass that bullshit. Because otherwise, why are we begging people for respect that no one else has to beg for it. Like,
Yeah.
we already know we're good. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I did a gig with Judy for the first time, for maybe February or something, and I was like,
Right.
"Oh my God, I'd never seen her before," and I was like, "She's amazing."
And she got to the point where people sort of had to go to her, you know, like it was like,
Yeah,
but if she, like, I honestly do believe 100% that if she'd gone to Edinburgh, done like a full show, spent 10 grand, put her face everywhere, would have been like 3 stars, 2.5.
yeah.
I just honestly believe that from the evidence that I've seen thus far in terms of how
And
acts are perceived up there and stuff.
it's great to see these kind of success stories of the social media age with people like Andrew Schultz in America has really just been like, the whole traditional media has gone, no, we don't want you, we don't want to give you a special, we don't want to do this, like, you're just not interesting to us. And he's gone, okay, I'm just going to build my own thing, put it all out for free, and
Mm.
then do this Patreon model and do this whole. And then someone like K Kurd in the UK has done something similar with putting out clips and clips and clips and clips, and then he ends up on Live at the Apollo because he's got such a colossal like following that,
Yeah.
like, I view it as like, if you have an Instagram or a Twitter or a YouTube page where you build up subscribers or followers to a certain degree, you've essentially built your own TV channel.
Oh,
Because
but that's exactly it. And like I say to everyone, like, even though I don't always take this advice, but create, and put out, create, and put out. And and then the more you can learn about how to create professionally, and the more you can learn about how social media works in terms of just little things like, you know, just like keep it short and blah blah blah, all that
yeah,
stuff.
and
But yeah, like create, and put it out there, because if you wait for people to come, like that, you know, that
it's
might never
potentially a very
arrive.
long, yeah, very long
Yeah.
waiting game that has no end point. And even if they do pluck you, there's a lot of stories of people being plucked and then kind of being put through the system and then thrown out the other end with
Yeah.
nothing of their own to land on.
Yeah, it's very true. I think you have to know your worth, and to know your worth, you have to know what you're good at. And you can't know what you're good at if you're just kind of expecting people to spoon feed you kind of work. But if you've spent time creating your own content, you know your worth, and you know what you're good at.
Yeah.
So yeah, create. And it doesn't, you know, if you're like introverted, like I'm not very good with sketches and filming
Mm.
online stuff. You know what I mean? Like, but what can I do? Or I can tweet, I can write, I can podcast. Do you know what I mean? Like whatever. We don't all have to be like creating characters and doing all that. I
Yes.
understand that's a
Yes. Yeah.
skill
Yeah.
set.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's a real skill set. I'll be real. I don't have it. I can't do accents. I'm not a very like big, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
person. Like, I'm
Yeah.
just like, but I know what I can do. I can speak. I can be opinionated. I can offer different views, and so on. So you think about what you can do, and it's, if you can do live stand up, you have something else you can offer to people in terms of content. Brilliant, absolutely. Even if it's blogging, you know,
Yeah.
set up a Patreon blog, like whatever you. If you can stand up on stage and talk for 20 minutes, make people laugh, you've got something else you can offer in terms of content. And
Yeah,
so,
you're at least interesting, because you have to be, you can't, like, funny is great on the be all and end all, but it's like there's interesting, and Patrice O'Neill said stuff like that. It's like, if you're not going to be funny, you have to at least be interesting. And I think
yeah.
you kind of inherently have that ability to grab attention from people in different ways.
Absolutely. I always say it, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I theorize that to be good at comedy, you don't have to be funny, you have to be likable.
Mm.
Because if you're likable, you can kind of get away with all sorts. But if
Yes.
no one likes you, then even when people don't like you because of your high status, they revel in that. You know, they just
Yes, and
enjoy
there's some
everyone like you.
awareness of that.
Yeah.
And
A lot of open mic comedians don't get that. They sort of think they can just not. They don't understand that it's not about being the anti whatever,
yes.
like
Yeah.
it's, you still have to be liked. You have to, if you're going to have a kind of persona which is unlikable, you have to deserve that.
Yes,
It's very
it has
hard.
to be real, like, because like someone like Patrice, I think he's to come back to him, he can present an idea that you wholly disagree with,
Mm.
but you're just like, that's so fucking funny.
But he turns
Like,
it on his head as well. Like sometimes he pretends like he's about to say something really
yes,
wild, and then he turns it on his head to just to kind of prove a point. and to draw out the people who are laughing at the wrong bits as well, which is always quite funny.
Yes.
So he's quite a good example of someone who is so good at comedy. Like, you don't, he's likable, but you're not supposed to like him.
Yes.
He's an absolute piss taker when he's on the stage, which is what I probably really like about him, actually.
Yeah, it's like there's some element of like not taking yourself too seriously on stage, so that everyone can go, okay, like everyone relaxes a little bit.
Yeah, especially if you're going to talk about controversial subjects, I think that's a really good way to do it. I certainly think I get away with some of the things I've said and do say, because before I say them, I just talk about sperm or whatever. Like, you just sort of soften people up a little bit, and then you go, right, white supremacy, let's talk about that.
Yeah, because it's you need to show people what your vibe is and what your kind of like what your approach is to topics in general. And like I have jokes that I cannot open with, because I need to open by going, I don't take very much very seriously, and it's all quite silly. And then once I establish that by talking about like blue whales or something, then I can go into talking about like being Irish in England, or kind of like any of these, like politics or just anything like that, because I've established on kind of safer ground who I am.
I think that's definitely our burden, if we want to, not necessarily burden, but that's definitely what we have to do in order to say, if we want to make people laugh at things they might disagree with, we have to get them to know that we're funny. So they have to trust us. So if they spent the first 5 minutes laughing, they are comfortable, they know this person's funny. So then when you start to say things that more than likely they either won't understand or won't necessarily have discussed before, or they won't have heard a lexicon before, or whatever, you've already proved your point that you're good at your job. So they can't not listen. Like, oh, I'm not listening to this shit. Well, you have to, because I saw you laughing. I can see you. This isn't that great comedy club. The lights are not hiding your face. So you and you can command people's attention that way. And that's probably like the disadvantage you probably face, is should you choose to talk about certain things on stage. But it's also an advantage, because I think when you pull it off, it is like a much more powerful bit of comedy.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of the comedy world is going through a pretty turbulent period right now, and it's overwhelmingly positive. I think people kind of get caught up in like obviously it's negative. The things that have happened and continue to happen in the culture that exists is negative, but the highlighting and potential dismantling of that is a positive.
If we're talking about the whole sexism and sexual abuse stuff, so first of all, this happens every 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
So I've gone through 2 phases, 2
cycles.
We had 2 clear-outs since I've been a comic, which is nice. I think there were 2 things to address. First of all, I don't think it's too controversial to say there are some people who are in sort of the comedy world because they perform or they run gigs, who aren't really comedians or promoters.
Yes.
And, I've heard some names. I'm like, who the fuck is he? Not that I have to have heard of you to have been someone, but you kind of look them up. And what it is they use a pub once a month to run a gig, and so all of a sudden they've got the title of capital P promoter.
Yes.
And they are then and then they are then part of a scene. So it's really important. Like, just the point I'm trying to make is, a lot of these people are just kind of inflating their status in the comedy world, and we are allowing them to inflate their status by not being real about what it is they really are and what it is they've achieved in comedy. And so that's actually me standing in defense of the comedy world. Like, just because any old arsehole can go on a stage anywhere for free and shout at 10 people in their
and
dog,
is therefore a comedian.
Yeah, exactly. So if that person is an abuser, that's absolutely right. They should be ousted, and they are in a comedy community, and the comedy community should be clear about who they are. But I sort of think when we're making a wider commentary about comedy as an industry, we can't.
Industry.
If I go to a life drawing class and draw somebody, I'm not in that, and I do something inappropriate, that's not a commentary on the art
world. Yeah, you're not.
And I feel like we need to be a bit more honest and a bit more
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, it took a very long time before I referred to myself as a comedian. Do you know what I mean? I didn't walk around going, I'm a comedian because I've just done 12 at the Cavendish. Like,
yeah.
So I thought that's the first thing I'm going to say about that. The second thing is that the problem will be and will always be that the higher the status of the abuser, the less the repercussions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've noticed so much noise for some sweaty, greasy. I don't want to say all sweaty, greasy people are abusers. So maybe,
That's a funny place that we've landed in.
But like I've seen, anytime some horrible, greasy guy who has very low standard, when he gets out, literally it's a pylon.
Yes,
right?
Because there's no consequences for piling on that person.
Tesilia steps down from the LCA, silence. I had to be told because I didn't know what. First of all, the other thing as well is, unfortunately, I'm a little bit out of the loop, so I don't know who these. Like I said, the names I have heard of, I don't know who they are, and the other people, I don't know who they are because no one's told. Understandably so, because people are scared about libel and stuff. But anyway, he's come out, and it turned out he was in the habit of for a long time of getting women drunk. He doesn't drink, by the way. And to the point where they either couldn't consent or he would be quite manipulative in the situation. I'm not familiar with the stories. I'm just aware that's the headline. Which
and it is like, I think just for that, in case of all the libel stuff, it's like these are allegations and stories, and he's apologized broadly. And it was a very strange thing where like he apologized before anything had come out. It was almost like he saw the writing on the wall and was like, I'm gonna try.
People probably contacted him. Like I said, I'm paying the price for being a bit of a how can I put this, a bit of a miser or whatever. Like I do my gig, say hello, have a beer and go home.
That's the way to do it though. But that's the way to do it.
I'm not in the
you don't want to be checking those Facebook groups every day. It's not good.
So unfortunately it's a bit annoying now because I haven't got my ears to the ground, so I don't know all that. But it's just he's been very if anything, but he's been proactively stood down from his position and he's put out a statement. And we just compare it to what's happened to other people, and it's markedly quieter. So if we still are in a position, both men and women, where we don't like abusers unless we think our career is going to be threatened, and then we can deal with a little bit of sexism, and that's a problem for me personally, because it means that a lot of what we are doing and saying is performative.
Yes.
And I don't know how to fix that. I personally don't really, I'm chatting about it now, but I haven't really commented on anybody's situation publicly unless I want to talk to them privately, because I just want to be consistent. And I think we should all try and think about whether if we're willing for our behaviour to be considered for everyone, and if we're not, be quiet, and if we are, make sure that everybody gets the same level of cancellation, so we say. And it's not just him. It's there were other people who have been brought up publicly who are similar or even higher standing, and nothing's happened. So that's what we need to address, like dealing with people consistently regardless of their level of success. But if we're starting to, I did say one thing. I said if Louis CK can't gig here anymore, and he didn't even touch anyone, he's got a stick out, then why are we
treating it different?
Let's be consistent. Louis, and again, that's all performative well then, isn't it? When Louis CK got booked, people were just going mad. I wasn't that fussed myself personally. I let him play. If people want to watch him, that's just
there is a question around, like, I had an interesting kind of experience where I run like a new material gig in a bar, and
you're promoter, capital P.
Yeah, that's me. And a female comic messaged me after a show one time and said, "Hey, this guy made me feel quite uncomfortable. He was just very in my personal space, kind of like almost taking up half my chair, and then like tried to kiss me on the cheek before I left, and like I didn't really know him, and it just made me feel really uncomfortable, and like I didn't feel very safe." And I was like, "Oh, that's not good. Like you want everyone to feel safe and kind of like welcome in the environment of a gig." And at the time, this was like months and months ago, I was like, okay, I won't book that guy again. And I think that's the response of a lot of promoters with a capital P, and like all sorts of people, to just be like, okay, not booking them anymore. And then when all this stuff started coming out again, and kind of getting attention again, I thought, is me not booking him and doing nothing else really helping the problem? Because if he just stops getting booked at all of these nights, then he just goes away and becomes a creepy accountant in another world, rather than a creepy and he's never been told that he's done anything wrong. He's just, people just stop booking him, and every time he messages goes, oh, we're all full up. So I thought, well, what should I do? Like, I don't know him that well, but I know him a little bit. So I just sent him a message and was like, hey man, people have said that you made them feel uncomfortable because of this and this. um like, I don't think it's necessarily something you're aware of or something you're doing maliciously, but it's something you need to be more aware of. And because you can't make people feel like that, and it's not good, basically. And he was like, oh my god, I didn't know at all. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. And then he said, could you give me an example of something, just so I know what, like, the kind of thing? And then I said to the girls, I was like, can I screenshot this message and send it over, with the names taken out, and just to like give him an exact example of what you felt like was happening. And they were like, yeah, of course, that's great. Sent it over to him, and he was like, oh my god, thank you so much. Like, like, can't believe, whatever. I'll really try and work on being better. And I think he reached out and apologized, because he worked out one of the girls who it was. And look, if he comes back and behaves similarly, then he can no longer plead ignorance.
No,
And
no, he can't. No.
but maybe he was ignorant, and maybe he now knows, and now isn't that person that's making people feel unsafe. And is that better than just like ousting him, for use of that word?
I'm not suggesting that like people in comedy are like these really inexperienced people that know anything, but I started comedy a bit later than most people, and like I said, I worked until November, and I've had lots and lots of jobs. I can
Yeah,
honestly tell you right now, guys are just creepy wherever the fuck you go.
this is yeah.
So first of all, if a guy's in a comedy club doing something that's very unpleasant and creepy, you're absolutely right to say you came out of that club, he'll go and be an accountant somewhere,
Yes.
or a civil engineer who used to work
Yeah.
with them. They're creepy little fucks. Okay. But just to kind of give it some context, okay, I think that context is something that's being lost. It's just, we live in a society in which men are encouraged to be over familiar with women, and women are encouraged to be receptive to it, or at least to ignore it, or to the point where men will be over familiar and you don't even notice it anymore. You
Yes.
just kind of, I've spent ages going, oh, guys have never been weird to me, and then I'm like, oh, what about that time? What about that time?
Yeah, the number, you're like, oh, that's just Gary.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But it's like,
so it's like, I think it's really important to know, to say and understand that if a man's made you feel horrible, that's a completely legitimate and way to feel, and you should feel comfortable to talk to him, to say it. But also, like, it's not like a characteristic of going to a pub. Do you know what I mean? Is unfortunately that like that. So I don't know what a point is there, but that's just something
it's not specific. Every time it comes out in a different industry, I kind of go, well, there's another industry that it's come out in, and it's
just wherever you find kind of heteronormative, and just it's whether you find guys and whether you find women, like it happens. It's just in the comedy you have the added thing of will happen late, because comedy happens late, happen in a dark place, because we do comedy in dark places, and it will happen probably not that close to where you live, because in comedy you go to places where you live, so it has that added.
And it's like there's a weird distinction where when you work in an office and then you go for after work drinks, those are different things. But with comedy, it's like you do the thing and then it kind of bleeds into after work drinks.
So I've always treated from day one, I've treated comedy places like my workplace. I've never gone to a bar and felt like I'm in a bar. I was like, let me do what I've come to do, whatever. Which I think is again, like it means you probably miss out on the crack, but it's at the same time like so I've appropriated crack. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. You can have that one.
Right. Thank you. Anyway, the second thing is that the only thing that fixes this is men. We can't really do anything about it. Like with me, I think I don't tend to get men be over familiar with me, because when it starts, I like, my favorite word to keep it social. I love that. And when I say that, men know they're not keeping it social because they fuck off.
Yeah.
So that's how you know. So that's my little my little kind of, that's my rape alarm, if you so you could call it that, or whatever. Or I've got, you know, I'm quite good at just like, but not all of you. Not, but I was 31 when I started comedy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You're 21. It's a different. I'm not saying that all 21-year-olds are like shrinking little violets, but it's just a different energy that you have. You know,
it's just less self-assurance and just like less kind of.
Oh God, you know, and I've seen a lot more. You know, 10 years of life, you see a lot more than maybe, you know. It's just how it is. So, you know, women can't always be expected in an industry where networking is so important, and image and reputation are important, to just be rude to every guy they meet who's an arsehole. Because if you was rude to every guy you meet who's an arsehole, I'll tell you right now, you're going to get a reputation to be fucking rude. So we rely wholly on men to do kind of what you did, which is, you're not playing my gig again. Okay, then we send you a note to explain your behaviour. Sometimes it's the same with race too. It's really difficult to articulate to people what and how and why you feel like you're a victim in the moment. You kind of need somebody else, you know, whether it's a man or whether it's a white person, to just kind of understand it and then explain it. And that's partly exhaustion, we're tired of explaining. But it's also partly like, we feel like if we talk about it, if we're the ones to draw attention to it, it comes with that baggage of, oh, you're overreacting, you know, well, maybe I can't even leave my house now. Maybe I can't like a Facebook post. Is that harassment? Like, you just get these bizarre
kind of what about, what if,
what aboutery, right? So we rely wholly and utterly on men to just do the right thing on our behalf, and ultimately, because this is not our problem, you know, this is it's not our problem, we're just existing, you know.
And it's hard. I did a podcast with a guy who went to drama school, and just talking about kind of like race issues in there, with being a very white institution, and his experience as a black student in a drama school, and that kind of thing. And he was like, it's so frustrating to arrive and just want to learn how to act, but then you have to become this activist person, because you just like, I'm just here to learn, like you're just here to tell jokes. I'm just like, you're just here to do what everyone else is here to do, but you've been loaded with this baggage of having to represent your community, or having to speak out against injustice or discrimination or like abuse. And it's just like, fucking like, that's not why I mean, like, when people
also,
like, you just want to get offended, it's like, I just want to tell jokes. Do you know what I mean?
And it's highly ineffective. Us doing it has never worked. You know, I mean, sort of on race issues, black people have been saying this shit for, like, I'm not lying, centuries. We've got books that date from the 17th century about fucking anti-racist. You know what I mean? So it doesn't even work when we do it. We are highly and entirely reliant on the people who are doing it to dismantle it themselves. Okay? And that's the same for men in the industry. And it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. If guys are going to be very, very loud and proud and strong when it comes to some idiot, and then, well, you know what I mean, somebody who hasn't really achieved very much, who they feel like they can stamp down on, but very quiet, when it's somebody who's in a place that they want to be in, then that's not helpful to us as women, because that means when we are in a space with that guy, he still has that power, right? Because we know he can do what he likes to us, and there will be no repercussions. Louis C.K. is a good example of that, actually, because for a lot, everybody knew he was a sex pest. You know, even I knew. I was, you know, at my level, everybody knew it, but they also knew that because he had the power to make and break careers, and he did, there were people who just just had to leave comedy because of what he did and how people wouldn't believe them. That made women complicit, because we want to make a living too. You know, so we wholly rely on guys to fix it conclusively. And that's, you know, that's where it stands. That's in my view.
It was interesting what you said about we've been writing textbooks about this since the 1700s. My friend John has a really funny joke about just English people's lack of understanding about Irish history, which is kind of another permutation of colonialism. And he was like,
it's colonialism. It's a post-colonial country.
Mate, post-colonial, I'm in an occupied state right now. Do you know, like, I'm in Belfast, which is just a remnant of the British Empire, in my opinion. Do you know what I mean? It's insane.
it's been massively racialized, the colonial narrative, massively.
And yeah, I wanted to raise that, but the John's jokes is like we've got bookshelves and libraries full of Irish and history and Britain's involvement in Ireland, and British history to them is just a post-it note that says 2 world wars and 1 World Cup, and it's just like that's their understanding of their history, and it's like the lack of understanding of number one there the consequences of British accents around the world, but also a lack of understanding of the greatness of other countries and the wealth of knowledge and art and culture and all these things that have been brought to the table by non-British and non-colonial places.
It's like I mean, to believe that civilization is inherently at its core white European, and everything extends from that, is a form of insanity.
Yeah,
it doesn't, and every fact that we have about human history, as in anthropologically, so where we came from originally, to kind of like, I guess, historically, so when, you know, but in terms of the great civilizations, we've heard of these people, we've heard of the Aztecs, we've heard of the Mesopotamians, we've heard of the Egyptians, we know these people exist. So in the face of kind of all of this knowledge, to even suggest that civilization only really started 500 years ago, it's insanity. It's a mental delusion. And it's one that I think is, it's a burden I don't want anymore, actually. I'm bored. Yeah. I'm absolutely bored of saying to people, for 3,500 years, Egyptians are running the show, and you've been fucking things up. The British Empire lasted for about 90 years.
Yeah.
90, that's what it lasted for. Then it fell apart because it was shit. This is historical fact. I'm not making this up. You know, 3,500 years versus 90 years. I'm sorry, man, but I think there were a bunch of brown North Africans that win there. You know, so, and then, you know, it's just, I don't know what. I'm bored. It's just, but this is what I mean about it's not up to me anymore. So that's why half of me was quite pleased to see white people pull down Colston's statue, because I was like, finally, this is not us. We know. Yeah. I mean, we know. We don't need that. We get it. There's not all of us know as it happens, but most of us do, or some of us do. But you know, I mean, it's really with Ireland. I mean, I'm guilty. I was guilty for a long time of being really ignorant about Britain's role in Ireland. I've always understood that the change in definition of whiteness meant that for a long time Irish people weren't considered white, but I'd never really considered the occupation of Ireland before until I read a book, which was a play, which I know is really famous to you, but wasn't famous to me, and it was Translations.
Oh, that makes me so happy. So I'm basing my Edinburgh debut on the structure of that.
Yeah, and it's a really powerful play.
Oh my goodness!
A version of which actually exists in many cultures, as it happens.
Yes.
Not because it's just because it's a natural story to tell. And
well, I think it's got a lot of a book I read in school was a book called Things Fall Apart.
Oh, right, so very similar. Very, example of what I'm referring to. Yeah, precisely. British people come along and fuck things up. That's basically the narrative. There's some really good Kenyan writers have written about stuff like that. Anyway, so Translations really, it was the act of it's called Translations because the whole book is basically Irish being turned into English, as in the Irish language. And I hadn't really considered that, which I always knew Irish was a language.
Yes.
And I always knew that people,
which a lot of people don't even know that,
which is weird. Well, I know it because there's bare people's names I can't pronounce.
Yeah.
It's like Cadrick, what? That's how so I've always been conscious of there being a language, Ireland having a native language, the same way I've always understood Scots and Welsh to be native languages. And I'd always understood these countries to speak English, but I'd never really processed that as a form of language before. Because I was brought up in a British education system.
Yes, yeah.
And I then have another focus, which is kind of sort of Southern Hemisphere colonialism.
Yes.
Which is what I said earlier about colonialism being quite racialized. Again, white supremacy, the story must always be white people conquering brown people, and not necessarily culturally that happening across races in different ways. And that's kind of inspired me to understand the occupation of Ireland a bit more. And we know that we don't understand it because no one understood the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah.
Okay, I kind of understood it, and then I kind of got to grips with it more because of Brexit. So it's and it's funny enough when people talk about decolonize the curriculum, they're never really talking about Ireland. Actually,
Yeah.
in fact, they're
And
not
for
talking
me,
about Ireland.
it's wild that like the recency of it, the kind of the fact, like what I said, like I'm in Northern Ireland right now, which
Mm,
is a colonial occupied territory
mm,
essentially, and it's like been normalized by the fact that people were planted into the country and they've now got a hold over a lot of land, and people say, oh, but what about the wants of the unionists in Ireland? And I'm like, the unionists just are descended from people who were planted into there deliberately to cause this kind of division and this kind of separation, and I don't know, like obviously their current thoughts are valid, but I don't understand how you can historically justify that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna. I can't comment too much about because I don't. Like I said, I'm not as familiar
Yes,
with
yeah,
it
yeah.
as you are. But what I would say is that's a really the story. It can be seen. See, the same stories in Israel. The same story was in
Yes.
Rwanda. The same story was in the Congo. You know, just like divide and conquer. You know, and some of that division would be of two native people. And some of the division of people who are settlers who've been there
Yeah.
for a long time. I mean, North America is probably the most quote unquote successful example of settlers going, "Oh, fuck you guys," and
Yeah.
doing away with everyone. And these things happen because they are designed to create perpetual conflict.
Hmm.
These things were never done to kind of eventually end up in some resolution. It was always done to have some kind of power struggle for the advantages of which sometimes are unknown to me. I think, yeah, I mean, there's no way I think to move on from there's no way to go back to a situation in which you can like erase that history, that
Yes.
recent history. And what pisses me off, like more than anything, is that the people who cause the trouble just kind of go, well, bye, have a
Yeah.
nice time. Do you know what I mean? And they
Yeah.
let the people like yourself kind of have to try and figure it all out. Um, so I'm so bad at name. Who was the journalist who sadly was shot about a year ago?
Lyra McKee.
Right, I wasn't familiar with her work sadly until she died. She wrote really powerfully about genetic memory and
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
how people how about the troubles of passed down traumas through the
Yeah, and
generations.
the suicide rate
That's exactly,
in
yeah.
my
Sorry,
essentially my generation, kind of the ceasefire babies of just
yeah,
like it's more people have died since the troubles than died during it, in
yeah.
terms of like the knock-on effect on mental health.
And so when we talk about colonial studies, this is exactly the kind of thing we need to study. And
Yeah.
I say, yeah, study it, you can't heal it. But it's traumatic, and it's traumatic when it's not being. There's nothing more traumatic than kind of making noise and people are just going about their day. You
Hmm.
know, people are like, oh well, okay, and then we just go about our day and we'll just do normal
Yeah.
stuff. So it's all of it. I don't know. It's just shit, really. So yeah, like I said, going back to what I was saying before, it's a form of insanity that people believe what they're the center of things. It's a form of insanity that people think everything's okay,
Yeah.
I'm kind of bored with talk. I don't really want to explain stuff to people. I like to bookmark things for people and say go here or go there.
Yeah.
But I almost can't be asked any. I can't be bothered anymore
Yeah,
because
you can be a signpost and go, these are some things that might help, but I'm not going to walk you through it. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, I didn't when I kind of started to get a bit of an awakening about kind of um, English history and its relationships with kind of its Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. I didn't go and find a Welsh person and say, walk me
What up?
through it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just the audacity. Why would I do that? So I don't. But and I think that's kind of the attitude we need to kind of maybe reawaken in people now. I
Do
think
you ever find, when you were talking about how like well, it's been racialized, and also that not even all people within the communities that have been historically oppressed are aware of a lot of these things? They're like, because just like they're aware of their own personal experience, but they're not aware of kind of the historical context of that experience. And do you ever find, and you might not, as I find this to be, it's much less common in people of color, in my experience, where other Irish people will say to me, "Oh, is that not just in your head? Like you thinking that English people think you're stupid, or you thinking that English people have this idea of you or this idea of you?" Like other Irish people will be like, I don't think that's real," and I'm like, it. I really believe, from my experience of living in England, that it is, and I don't know how to prove this to you. I don't know how to
No,
explain.
it's totally true. Anti-Irish sentiment is a massive thing in English people. We in the playground we had English, Scottish man,
Yeah,
Irishman.
Paddy Irishman.
You know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah.
So we grew up on that shit. So as a quote unquote English person, I'm sorry, like it's true. It's all true. It's not in your head.
Yes, but do you
It's
ever
not in your
find
head.
that with other black people, for example?
Yeah, because we're as capable of being brainwashed as anyone else. The
Yes.
same way, you know, like we're not superhuman. We're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
like we're not intellectually more superior than anyone else. So we're as capable of being dumb as the next person.
Yes.
Absolutely. There are black people who say colour isn't an issue. You can say, okay, there's the Brit Awards, everybody in the music industry is there. There's literally no dark skinned black women. Oh well,
Yes.
maybe not good enough. You know,
What's
so
the
it's
chances of
just,
that?
you know,
Yes. Yeah,
like
yeah,
really,
yeah.
like fucking Mabel, that's the best we can do?
Yeah.
Really? Like, come on, she's the best female artist in this country. Like, do you know what I mean? She's lovely, but come on. So, you know, there's absolutely the case where people of your own, whatever you're talking about, whether it's
Yeah.
racial or religious or whether it's your nationality, there will always be people who deny their oppression, first of all, because they don't see it happening to them.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, because they're invested in it. You know,
Yeah.
there are black people as invested in white supremacy as there are white people. You know, in South Africa, the townships were policed by other black people.
Yeah.
You know, because the choice, if you saw how you had to live when you was in a township, if you had a choice between living like that or policing the people that you fucking choose to police it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, you know, we are as capable as being stupid and dumb, as unintelligent as stupid, dumb, unintelligent white people. We're not beyond that.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's what I'm probably more invested in fixing black people rather
Yeah.
than white people. I'm more invested in that conversation.
Yes.
That's probably something I tend to have more energy for.
Yes.
But you
And
know,
you
like,
speak about like something called Pan-Africanism, and for people, I think that's quite a. For me, I think you and maybe listening to and watching Akala were maybe the first two people I heard speak about that as a term. I'd never really heard it before, and until I looked it up, and I was like, oh, what does that mean? So for people who are listening who don't know what Pan-Africanism is, I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it feeds into what we're saying. But just like a kind of background on what that is and what it means to you.
it's basically a sort of a concept that seeks to address the fact that kind of black people who make up the diaspora around the world, and not everyone knows the term diaspora. Diaspora is kind of like a generic term we use for the kind of African descendant communities that are global. So African Americans, Afro Brazilians, Afro Colombians,
Yes, there's
Afro Europeans. You
there's
know,
like and the word diaspora isn't specific to black people. There's like a Jewish diaspora, Irish diaspora, but it's like, yeah.
it's that absolutely, yeah, but it's we've appropriated it.
Yes,
We
yeah,
stole it. But it's just because the conversation we tend to talk about it, I guess. But you're absolutely right. It can apply to any kind of
Yeah.
global community that's dispersed around the globe. It basically seeks to just promote the understanding of the truth that all these people descend from Africa, and that's all it is. So that's a lot of people mistake it as denying people identity. So someone said to me, well, I don't want to call myself African because I'm Jamaican. I'm like, you're no less Jamaican because you're African. Jamaica is your nationality. Yeah, you will always be Jamaican. You'll always be about patties and you know, Bob Marley and festivals, and that's you. That's your culture, and we celebrate because you created that out of what you was left with. You know, the Jamaican culture is one of the biggest cultures in the world, and look what they've come out with. There's this powerful island right there. I would never say that anyway. Pan-Africanism isn't about a race nationality, but it's about saying you're Afro-Jamaican. That doesn't change the fact that you come from the same place an Afro-Colombian comes from, or African-American comes from. And with that should hopefully, as a concept, change our focus from being about getting Europeans to like us and about, oh, actually, why don't we just all like each other? We are more invested in getting a black James Bond than really understanding, for example, the experience of Afro-Brazilians, where you have the largest Black population outside of Africa, you
Yeah.
know? And so it's about changing our viewpoint. And
Yes, that's so, I literally like, and such a dumb thing for me to think, but to the way I comprehend things is fucking idiotic. But I was literally like, oh yeah, like the Brazil football team is almost entirely made up of Black people versus the Mexico football team isn't. And I was like,
yeah.
oh, yeah. Well, like, why have I never even, like, you just don't kind of notice these things or these, and like that's obviously like a microcosm and like a very bizarre way to
But it's in
connect it
front
in
of
my
our
head.
faces, right? But
Yes.
we don't see it, and that's partly because we promote Brazil as some kind of bizarre post-racial society, which is not true at all. If you want to see real racism, you need to go to Brazil.
Mm.
But it also it speaks to the fact that we're an Anglophone world. So just to exemplify that, you know, if we're talking about the transatlantic slave trade,
Mm-hmm.
about 1 in 9 Africans were taken to North America. The West were taken to South America.
Yeah.
Okay, the slave trade was really about South America, but the narrative is Django Unchained and
Yeah.
12 Years a Slave and all that stuff. But actually, the reason for that was the journey to South America was a lot quicker, so they could just let the slaves die young and they bring more in.
Yeah.
But it's just important. We don't, when we think about the slave trade, we think about North America. The heart of it was actually South America, and the beneficiaries were people like Spain and Portugal.
Yes, when in their colonial kind of pasts.
Precisely. So Pan-Africanism, so that would be a story that as a Pan-Africanist you'd be really familiar with. But it's not just about it's not just about how we've all suffered by people. Like I said, it's just about that focus. It's about making that focus about being really pro-African, really pro-Black, and decentering whiteness and Europeanness from it's almost like, this sounds like a negative thing, but it's almost like, can we exist? Can we live our lives and pretend white people don't exist? I don't wake up every day and think, what do Vietnamese people think about me? Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
I don't wake up every day and think, what do Chinese people think about me? Do you know what I mean? So it's about, how do we get away from waking up every day and thinking, oh, white people, what are we going to do? Like, no, that's a distraction from our work. But if we're going to talk about work, the work should be inward looking, and it should be looking towards our brothers and sisters and cousins and uncles and aunties around the world. And then similarly, the people in a continent that actually would want our tourism and want us to buy their books and want us to consume their art and want us to amplify them, you know. And that's actually, it's not happening within the context of Pan-Africanism, but we are slowly but surely starting to care more about Africanness. So there was a big festival in Portugal that, I mean, I don't know if it'll keep happening, but there was a big African festival in Portugal last year, and there was like Year of Return last year, where Ghana did this thing where they just said it's Year of Return, just come on, have a nice time. That was a big deal, and lots of things are happening, and slowly but surely people are starting to be less afraid of connecting with Africanness as broad as a concept as that is. That was a very long answer to what was actually quite a short and simple question.
No, but it's a good kind of concept to understand, and this, and I think I maybe, because I had a question kind of written down where I was like, is there something that could be done, and not to kind of co-opt it or anything, but is there something about where kind of like the colonized, like, because like you talking about, I think like, what do white people think of me, and this idea of like when people say, oh, he made it out or she made it out, what they mean, they made it into white culture essentially is what they mean. And it's like, well, why don't you just do, it's like he made it out of the ghetto, and it's like, well, why don't you build up that community, or like, why don't you build up kind of like this thing? And then there's I heard like when Tyler the Creator received some kind of Grammy or award or something, but the category was something around like urban music or urban this, and he said that's just a way for corporations to not say the N-word, but they like, that's what they want to do.
And that was a soul album he won that for. He won that for
Flower Boy, was it?
I can't
Or
remember
Igor maybe, but anyway.
I think it was Igor. It was anyway, but that was a soul music album. But because he's Tyler the Creator, they couldn't bear to give him
a white award or like
an award. You know, he's not non-threatening enough to get that award.
Yeah.
You know? You're absolutely right. There are lots of ways in which we are in which the idea that proximity to whiteness is great. And there are lots of ways
Yeah.
in which that's reinforced. In fact, I saw something today and I tweeted about it. Someone said, this guy was the first guy to get a PhD in medicine. And he was African.
I saw this tweet.
In 1934. And I just thought that idea that we only were allowed to be or were only able to get anywhere in academia in 1934. Like, it's just
what was it like? How were people treating illnesses and injuries for hundreds and thousands of years?
And it's weird because it's like it's so well intentioned, and I think there is something to be said about a black person in a racist society being the first person in that society to get that particular accolade. But then there's a lot of commentary on all black people in all the world through all of history, right? And that kind of language is just passively just thrown out and absorbed by people, and it reinforces the greatness of whiteness. Aren't we so great? We've run everything for 5,000 years, and finally a black person has finally got a PhD. Well, it's just absolute garbage. So, you know, the way we use language is entirely oh, you got out of Ireland, good for you. You know, what fuck? Do you know how nice it is in Ireland?
I hate this. I hate that I was aware of this from when I was 18, when I initially left Ireland, and like just this feeling of, I hate the fact that anyone talented or intelligent or creative with a lot of potential in Ireland immediately goes, well, I better get to England. And I just think we're just contributing to this culture of we're just shipping all of our best assets away and not building, like, because I feel like for comedy I have to be in London to do comedy properly and make it big, whereas I'm like, well, what about Dublin, what about Belfast, what about these places? And I think I just hate the thought of contributing to that, but I don't know how else. Like, I want to be successful, but I don't know how else to do it.
No, I think there is a difference between going somewhere where there are physical resources that can help you. The reality is there's more. All the management is in London. All the best, or you can gig regularly in London for much less effort than maybe somewhere else, where you would have to, you know, even if you lived somewhere else in the UK, if you lived in the Midlands or something, you'd have to drive more, whatever. So I think if you're moving somewhere logistically, because that's logistically, resource-wise, an easier way to pursue something. That's, you know, if I want to be an actor in movies, I'll move to Hollywood, right? It's not a commentary
that's where it is.
So I think that's so you don't feel bad about that. It's cool. But I understand what you mean. But there's always a feeling of selling out in sometimes, you know, like, and you know, I'm lucky enough to do a lot of writing now, and I write for lots of very white shows, and I'm often the only black person in the room, or one of two black people in the room, and you often think like, oh, I'm just reinforcing the idea that this shit is the pinnacle, whatever. But really, you're not. You're just getting paid, and as long as your voice, as long as the work quality of your work is good, as long as your voice is strong, and as you know, I deserve to be in these places. That's the world I live in. You know, the creative industries in this country are white. You know, that's the sad state of affairs. There are black, you know, I could be on the black circuit, but there's a glass ceiling there. You know, Radio 4 doesn't have any shows from black producers.
Yes, because I meant to talk about like this with Tyler the Creator talking about this urban like award category. Like there's an urban circuit in comedy that people refer to, and I came from pretty much white homogeny, so I had never heard of anything like that. And then when I arrived and started doing comedy, I was like, what's the urban circuit? And then someone had to be like, oh, that's like black people gigs. And I was like, what the fuck is that?
So I'll tell you a little bit of history about the black circuit, which is often told by people who were there at the beginning, but I just I'll just give it. Basically, a long time ago, bookers didn't used to book black acts, so then black people made their own gigs. End of story. That's the black circuit. Okay?
Yeah, that's how it is.
So that's how it was, and so there's a real contradiction in British comedy where that people talk about the 90s and the 80s as being really socially conscious and right on, but no, they weren't, because they weren't booking black acts. So they were like, well, fuck this, and there's always been a tradition of kind of black gatherings it's particularly in England anyway. So we've always had our own clubs and our own this, that, and the other until those things, disintegrate
The
from music.
equivalent is would be like, but it's definitely more co-opted by English people, is like Irish pubs with Irish music shows and
Yeah. So I'm from
comedy
North
nights.
London, so like Kentish Town, Kilburn,
Yeah, very, very
Archway.
Irish communities. Yeah.
Yeah, like
The
a lot
Old
of Irish.
Triangle is a lovely pub around that. Yeah, but go on.
Yeah, so it's very very similar. So the black comedy circuit is just an extension of that, and it has remained resilient throughout the years. Why? Because comedy is culturally specific,
Yeah.
and there will always be a market for culturally specific comedy shows. There was an Asian circuit, there was a Muslim circuit, there was a Jewish circuit. It's not just a bunch of black people going, "Oh, white people do this." It's a bunch of black people talking about things. Comedy is about references.
Well, it's
You know,
yes, and I
so
find that I teach I literally I lost the job the other day because the school
oh
lost
no,
funding, but it's they lost all their arts funding, and I teach drum kit or I did in the school in Lambeth, and a lot of the students, like, I'd never experienced it before, but it was so wild. They were like, "Oh, he's Congolese," or like, "He's Nigerian," or "They're Jamaican," and kind of making, like, poking fun at these like different references that I'd never, like, the stereotypes about Nigerian people, or the stereotypes about Caribbean people. And I was just like, this is so wild. And there was one girl who would always come in and call me a random white name every week for the lessons. She'd
Dave.
literally come in and be like, "All right, Philip," and I was like, "What?" This is so wild.
Yeah.
But
So
it's
this
that
is
internal
yeah.
thing.
But this is the spirit exactly, and it's a culture. So imagine that. So imagine a black space full of black people, and then within that, like, you'll have. I'll go into a room and it'll be like for the Jamaicans, and I'll be like, "Oh no,"
Yeah,
I'll die. And then
yeah.
I'll go into it and it'll be full of black Christians, and I'll be like, "I'm going to die, I'm going
Yeah,
to
yeah,
die."
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what all the black circuit is, and long may it live, and long may it continue, and it mystifies people who aren't black, and it mystifies some black people who don't like them. And I think it's a very basic concept. I'll say it again: humour is culturally specific.
Yeah.
It makes complete sense that culturally specific spaces exist for people to enjoy humour that unfortunately wouldn't be enjoyed in any other space because you don't get
Yeah.
references. You don't know what supermodel is. You don't know about what the fear of not having taken the chicken out of the freezer when you were asked to.
Yeah.
There's just so it's our hair, our dating
Yes, for sure,
culture,
for sure.
the countries we come from, blah blah blah. And it's a circuit I never really properly cracked. I've done all the shows. I've had some good shows, had some bad shows. I'm lucky enough to have met lots of people on the circuit. And it's a big regret of mine, I guess, in my career is not having worked hard enough at that circuit. I think
Yes.
it was a real wasted opportunity for me, and it was really just shyness. I was always too
Yeah.
shy to go to the gigs. I was always too shy to talk to promoters and
I
all that.
like I almost want to, like, because you have a lot of these like Africans versus Caribbean shows, or
Yeah.
like
Oh, I don't do those. I don't do those.
oh
Personally,
really?
well, that's the one. I'm not into that. I think it's all in jest, but
Yes, but
they're
it
not jokes
feeds
I want to.
into a
I
culture.
don't. It feeds into one, and they're just not. First of all, I genuinely am half African, half Caribbean, so it's just.
Yes.
I think I feel that my thing is I want Africans and I want people from Africa, I want people from Caribbean, and then by extension, African people everywhere to like not be at war with each other. And I'm
Yes.
just bored of that, what we call diaspora wars. I just think, I can't. And it's kind of lazy. It's quite lazy comedy.
Yeah, a lot of them. I just thought I just had a funny idea of like I want to introduce like an Irish element to like that kind of circuit, and be like, yeah, let's get into these like like country competitions, because you see a lot of them, and I was just like, oh, that'd be so fun if we were like,
Black people versus Irish people.
yeah,
Like,
which is funny because it's like there's so many like like wild kind of, like, the civil rights movement in Northern Ireland was massively inspired by the civil rights movement in America. So people like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King really inspired the marching and protesting in Northern Ireland. And there's a woman called Bernadette Devlin, who's this amazing. She was the youngest MP ever before Mary Black got elected. So the second youngest now. But she, amazing woman. My granny doesn't like her because apparently she asked my granny to join the IRA and my granny didn't want to. But she's an amazing woman. And then there's a subculture of Irishness, of the Irish American, which is some of the most racist people in the world. And it's horrible that it's connected to Irishness, because Irishness is kind of not historically like that. We're not a colonial country. We're not historically like taking and grabbing other things. We're very kind of just been fucked over a lot. but Irish Americans, because of essentially what happened is they were in indentured servitude a lot of the time. They were sent over during like Cromwellian times, and some Irish people were in like the cotton fields with African slaves, like working with them. And very funny stories come out of that, where like African slaves would make fun of the Irish people for getting sunburnt and like slap their calves and stuff. And I think that's like a really beautiful example of even people in the most horrible situations, like humor and making fun of each other within that is still like really important to them, and really important to like to show. I think a lot of these representations of slavery and oppression is always like, oh, like how for poor me, like, but, and obviously horrible things, but it's like I
They
like
had
hearing
to,
about these
yeah.
shows that they put on for each other, and the culture that they created within the spaces that they were kind of pushed into. But what happened is these Irish people in America, to get out of those situations, would be actively more racist towards the African slaves, to show kind of, to place themselves alongside the oppressor and go like, no,
Mm.
I'm more like you than I'm like them, I'm on your side. And then they became police officers. That's that stereotype of like Irish police officers in America. And they became, I think, similarly in a way to what you were saying about South Africa, to get out of that place, they became and aligned themselves with the oppressive regime. And now you see a lot of people in like Trump's cabinet have Irish surnames, and it very much upsets me, because that's the kind of culture that they come
I
from.
think, yeah, and I think it, like I said, it's a change in definition of whiteness and what whiteness is. But it's a really common story. I mean, Italian Americans have a similar strong vein of racism within them
Yes.
because
Yeah.
it's there's there's not a there's in order for people to unify, there needs to be a unifying force, and there
Yeah.
needs to be an incentive, and that's always been lacking, sadly. And that's why they design societies like in that way. It's all done by design. It's
Yeah.
not by accident. Irish people they didn't indenture Irish people in slave Africans for any reason other than they wanted to have that divide.
Yeah.
And in the same way, when Irish people eventually became police officers, they didn't do that by accident. They made Irish people police officers because they wanted to further accentuate that divide. And it's this. Well, I say that's just a familiar story all over the world, where there's a set of colonized people and settlers and indentured slave. I'm from Guyana, and that's exactly the same story in Guyana, where you have the Indian population and the African population. And the Indian population were indentured laborers, and the African population were slaves. And then the Indian population then subjugated the African population. Blah blah
Yeah.
blah blah blah. So it's a cycle. I don't know. Humans behave in very predictable ways.
Yeah, and very tribalistically, and always try and align themselves with different groups and feel part of a community, which is good, and it's human, and it's important that you can feel part of a community. But it's not important, like obviously, like not at the expense of another, and not to divide and oppress.
Precisely. That's the issue, and I think like it goes back to what I was saying before. Like we're as capable as being thick, dumb, and ignorant as
Yeah,
everyone else.
which is
As
almost a privilege in and of itself. You know what I mean? Like I just want to be like a guy, like you just want to be like dumb, and you don't want to have to
yeah.
be constantly educating people and doing all this stuff.
Exactly. So I don't know. It's weird. You can talk about this forever and not come to a solution. I mean, look, the Maroons famously in Jamaica became free and they lived in the mountains, but they would find escaped Africans and sell them back. That's how they made their money.
Yeah.
So it's a dog eat dog world or crabs in a bucket. I don't know where along the way we lost our compassion, but we lost it, and not enough of the most important people in the world have it, sadly.
Yeah, and I think as people kind of going about our lives, I think with the age of the internet and social media, I think we're so well, there's a couple things. Number one, there are a million things going on that you should care about, and no one has the capability to legitimately care and work against or for or whatever like work towards these goals. And there's a million things, like, and it always pops up. It's like, okay, there's the Black Lives Matter thing, very important, everyone's looking over there, and then it goes, okay, Me Too is back again, so we need, okay, there's two things that we should, and that very legitimately should care about, and then everyone goes, what about Yemen? And then everyone goes, oh fuck, right, Yemen as well, and then everyone goes, okay, but Palestine as well, and you're like, okay, I've got four or five things, and then everyone has their struggles that they care about, and their things that they, and it's so hard to be righteous and like compassionate towards everything, and I think we get desensitized. Like, it's a generation of people who've watched ISIS beheadings from when they were teenagers, so it's hard to watch the news and gain any connection to a statistic on the screen and go, I care about all those. Like, when you see the stuff about Yemen, you see a number of people who are dying, and you just go, that's a big number. You don't think of all the lives of the people that are being affected by all these things, and it's so hard to just just it's so hard to be, it's impossible. It's an impossible task to rail against everything you should rail against.
No, you can't, and in many ways, it's not. There's no point, because you won't make a difference,
Yeah.
which is a fact. I think I think the only thing we can do as individuals with very little power is think about what we can change, and then work towards that. I think we are powerless to fix many problems directly. I don't, what can we do other than giving money to GoFundMe's and help with the white helmets in Syria, with Yemen? There's lots of humanitarian efforts there, and there have been for a long time. So we can think about that. I think what the best way to think about it is the reality. There is a reality that all of these smaller, not small, but all of these separate conflicts, Black Lives Matter, Me Too, Yemen, we could talk about climate change, we could talk about Palestine, we could talk about the Congo. All of these things throughout the world, they're still united by very simple concepts that we can grasp: capitalism, patriarchy, and neocolonialism. So whilst we can't affect those issues directly, what we can do is you can think about those three concepts and think, well, how can we co-opt ourselves out of them? How can we be less invested in capitalism? How can we be less invested in patriarchy? And how can we be less invested in neocolonialism? I think that's a good way to start, because what it does do is, rather than saying, how can I save the children in Yemen, you say, well, how can I live my life on a day-to-day basis that is less rewarding of these things?
Yes, and just working slowly towards, because we are the culture. Like, you can say there's a culture of this, but the people on the ground are the culture, and just slowly angling your own life to not support the systems that cause these atrocities and these
precisely
struggles.
And at the same time, we can still, like, I there are certain things that I support, and there are certain things that I do that I don't think have like a big impact, but they probably have like a macro impact, and that's fine. But I think by always looking at things in a kind of, there's nothing I can do, that's disempowering. So we just have to find ways to empower ourselves. So, no one makes us buy AirPods. No one makes us upgrade our phones every 12 months. No one makes us eat McDonald's, drink liters of Coke. No one makes us fly around the world for £5 and some
or buy fast fashion or any.
No one makes us buy fast fashion. Absolutely right. No one makes us waste water. No one makes us throw shit away we don't need. Blah blah blah. So and then no one made us vote for Tory. Someone did it. No one makes us do lots of things, but we still do it. So if we're invested in those three things, I will repeat myself: patriarchy, colonialism, and capitalism. If we're invested in de-investing ourselves in those things, I think that's a step in the right direction. And celebrating people who are trying to do that too, because it's very easy to look at these fucking hippies and call them fucking hippies, right? And many of them are. We have a massive. We have to de-racialize things like veganism, which has been co-opted by people who just want to dance around in Whole Foods, and stuff like that. And so there's still an effort to go to make sure those concepts and the dismantling of those concepts aren't just Karens running around going, oh, this is terrible. But that's the thing. Okay, fine, we can't change that. We can't change any of this shit. We can't go to Jerusalem and say, hey guys, have you tried talking? But what we can do is there are every day there is something we can do to slowly but surely improve our lives. And what we're actually trying to do, hopefully, just wash our hands of it. You know,
Just gradually.
once our behaviour changes, the people doing the things they're doing have less investment in it. I mean, look, the fucking Middle East, they're dying now to get fucking people to do their holidays over there because they've run out of oil. You know, so don't go to fucking Dubai. Don't go. Just don't go there. It's very simple. You know, don't go to Saudi Arabia for your holiday or whatever. Just fuck them. You know. But so that's what can we do? Change what we do. That's what we can do.
Yeah, because you just have to affect it in your own life. And I think as kind of like artists and creatives, like I think there's a lot to be said for just furthering this conversation and just putting these conversations and these topics out into the world. And you might not have the answer, but if you heighten the question in people's awareness, somebody much smarter than me might have the answer. Do you know what I mean? Or might have a better solution. But we are there to put the questions into the world and put the conversation into the world, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's important. I think, and that's one of the things I will congratulate the Black Lives Matter movement on. As much as I find lots of it problematic, you know, that it has gotten people to question things to a level they hadn't really questioned things before, and I appreciate that because, you know, it couldn't just be Black people complaining.
Yeah,
we had to start to kind of get this conversation going in more circles.
I've had someone say to me recently, and I'm interested to hear your opinion on this, where they said that they, like, white male comedians, now is not the time to do your funny viral tweet, like like whatever, like basically like just like now is not the time for jokes. And I kind of said, I said to my friend who posted that, I was like, that feels a bit broad to me, because if I'm making a joke that is on the right side of like in support of this person, or ridiculing the people who have horrible points of view, then what I don't think jokes minimize the gravity of a discussion or a topic if they're done in the right way.
I mean, you know, there's the whole thing about too soon. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I mean, I wouldn't direct that at white male comedians. I just say in comedy we have a thing called tact, and it's not, you know, everyone talks about free speech in comedy, and it's like, you don't have the right to say what you like. You've got the right to be fucking funny. So you better be funny, or we'll cancel you.
It's a feedback loop constantly.
If you say something shitty, we'll tell you about it. They talk about free speech. I'm sorry, but there's a really high correlation between people who talk a lot about free speech and people who aren't very good at comedy. You know, it's like, you know, the more you talk about free speech, probably the less funny you are. That's my general consensus. That's from, you know, in terms of the acts that bang on about, I can't play this gig, because you're shit. It's because you're not very funny.
And it's a specific kind of subcategory where you have like Dave Chappelle's very vocal about
Dave Chappelle has a Netflix special where he lays into the trans right movement, and he says on record that it's safer for a Black man to wear heels than to walk down the street in male clothes. That is absolutely not true. If you're a Black man, or so if you're a Black woman who is trans, your life expectancy is 35. It's a fucking lie. Do you know what I mean? You want to talk about free speech? Sure, stop it. No, it's nonsense. Dave Chappelle's very funny.
Yeah.
You know, that's why, but he, you know, and he's, of course he's very funny. He can chat shit about that community, you know, and then he, you know, so it's sorry, I interrupted you there, but that's a big trigger for me.
No, it's interesting because I fucking love Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, so do I. But he talks shit in that special. It's undeniable. So there you go.
I literally watched it last night. That's mad.
It's mad, isn't it?
That's it. That's an interesting point. I think the problem there for me is it's weird because you can take something in a set or in a joke form or in a comedy set and go, they believe that, and it's not the nuance of what he believes, and it's maybe not even at all what he believes. I think Dave Chappelle does a lot of things on stage and says a lot of things on stage that he doesn't necessarily believe. And I think the point for me that he was trying to make in that joke is that, like, there are people that complain about things that don't realize the struggles of other people. And it was just this joke about like the kind of the white, I think it's like the racialization of but this is the problem, is now I'm analyzing a joke that was fucking 2 sentences long, like
Well,
at the
I will say, I'll
paragraphs and
pick up on that, and
paragraph.
I'll say that a lot of the special is about comparing the civil rights movement to what he would call the LGBT movement, which is lots of different movement. And he's basically saying that, yeah, like we're trying, like gay people are trying to get free, we're still trying to get free, and the reason why I object to it all is that Black people can be gay. Okay, so what
Yeah,
are you talking about here? You know, like these aren't two disparate and opposite movements. They are together. If you're not fighting for all Black people, you're not fighting at all. So because that is something
yeah,
that's fundamental to my belief, it's a fundamental Pan-African belief as well. I don't fight for just British Black people. I don't fight for American Black people. It's for everybody. I can't get with that special because what is fundamental to finding those jokes funny is that LGBT means white and Black means straight Black. You have to
but do
fundamentally
you
believe
think?
those things to find those jokes funny, and I
But
don't believe it.
do you think? Because to me, what I saw it as is I mean, he should have been clearer and mentioned this maybe overtly, but I saw it as like I think the LGBT movement has been racialized, and there's a lot of people speaking out in that movement at the minute of being like, don't forget that the person who started the Stonewall movement was a Black trans woman. So it's
Yeah,
like don't forget. I think, but and the reason people are saying don't forget that is because it has been a very kind of it's become co-opted by corporations, and it's become very white, and on the face of it in the news and in the media I think it's become this white thing, and maybe Dave Chappelle like isn't trying to highlight that. Maybe he's like being ignorant and sees actually viewing as an only white thing. But I think to me I was like, oh yeah, this is put forward as this very white issue, whereas it's not that. It may I because I
no,
saw
it's
it.
not. I mean, no,
I
sorry,
just
carry
saw it
on.
as this like him kind of speaking about the presentation of it more than it, and that's hard to justify whether what he means, and like and he'll never gonna maybe speak in more depth about what the jokes mean because that's not very
Yeah, I
useful
mean,
very much at
sometimes
all.
it's not a very helpful thing to listen to a joke and then talk about it for like 20 minutes
Yes,
or
yeah, yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Sometimes it's just about, he said it, he said it. I think what you said there is true. I think there's massive problems with kind of people who are visibly absent from like the LGBTQI plus movement. There's lots of problems within the Black community about our inclusion of kind of
yes,
gay and trans people, and everybody else who is connected to that by some kind of extension. But it still doesn't. It's. I guess my thing is a joke's not funny unless it's true. It can never be funny unless it's true. Then if it's not true, then it's just you're just burning money, and then you're good at the craft, but you haven't told the funny jokes. The burning money, it was great at the craft, the jokes, but his jokes were hideous because they weren't true. And I just sort of thought there was too much stuff in that special that wasn't true. Well, there was quite a good thing about somebody being misgendered whilst a paramedic came in. It's like not important right now. Like
yeah,
like
yeah,
there's stuff. There were. I'm not saying that the show was littered full of kind of
yes, but there was a
disagreeable
thread.
things. But the thread that ran through it was the concept that it's you're either gay or you're Black, but you can't be both, which is something that is unacceptable to me because it's not true. And like I said, if it's not true, for me, it will never be funny because it's not progressive. We're not. It's just it's too. Everything has been going on for too long now for me to engage in things that aren't progressive. Can't be bothered. What's the point?
Yeah,
So that was the only reason why. And then and I'm not somebody who's going to say that guy's my hero, so everything he says is amazing.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
not my hero. I didn't agree with him there. That's my right.
that's
And
good. Yeah.
um, uh, why are we talking about this? I can't remember. Right,
uh
anyway,
well,
we were talking about
oh, about like being am I still allowed to be funny on Twitter
yes.
is the point.
If you're funny, you're allowed to be funny if you're funny.
Yeah,
That's of course you are. And I think that sometimes this is a very difficult time to be Black because everyone is just like, and
yeah,
we're all very like, oh, and I think that sometimes I don't know who said that to you, but it does sometimes mean that we might ask people to do things, we might see things, and we may just be like, not unreasonable, but we may be a bit sensitive to to things. But of course, you can be funny you're funny if you're funny. And if
Yeah.
you're not,
So
you're not. That's your
my recent story, like, to talk, and you probably did miss this because you're very cleverly don't pay attention to the shitty comedy Facebook groups. But I got booted out of one of them last week
Did
for
you? Congratulations. Which one
thank
was
you,
it?
thank you. I got booted out of the comedy collective on
Oh,
Facebook,
okay,
the
that's
big one, the flipping big
that.
useless one.
Yeah.
And basically, like, but then it wasn't even because I can just get booted out and I wouldn't really care that much. But somebody did a post in support of me, and then there was 250 comments in 2 hours about the
I'm gonna
validity of
fight. Is
my
it still
existence.
there?
No, it's gone.
Oh, is it gone?
Um,
Oh, okay.
but it was wild. So basically, the reason I got booted out is, and I think I've told this on the podcast before, but like, just for your context, is somebody posted a post being like, "I got offered this gig. I can't do it. Can anyone make it? We need a young person friendly comedian for a Zoom gig for a 16th birthday party." And I commented
I know what joke you made. I mean, I don't
at
know what.
Crystalia. Yeah, I just commented at
That wasn't the name
Crystalia.
I had, but I was like, oh god, Michael
Yes,
Jackson.
you
Or
know what
like,
I
what's
mean?
he gonna?
I just at Crystalia because I was like,
uh,
comedian, 16, young person friendly. You basically wrote a setup for a punchline, and I just wrote the punchline.
yeah.
And
They
then I
booted you
got,
out for that.
oh yeah, they boot, and then like dozens and dozens of people saying, "This guy's a fucking dickhead. He must be one of these free speech guys, edge lords, making these inappropriate jokes, like blah blah blah." And like, I think it's what you said, where I went, "This guy's been accused of pedophilia in the past 2 weeks. He's a comedian, a massive comedian in America. So I'm gonna, like, the joke is this guy's a pedo. So I've gone, there's a pedo, he's a pedo." And people have said, in the context of what's going on in comedy at the minute, difficult to view that in a light, humorous way. But at the same time, some people who've had direct experience of the issues with predatory behaviors told me that it was very funny, and some people didn't like it, and I don't really know what to do.
I mean, well, you don't just do anything. It comes under the too soon thing, which is part of craft. Actually,
Yeah,
it's part of craft. Is it too soon? Is it too soon to Dan a joke and all that
but
shit?
who
Yeah,
decides? I guess.
who decides? Who? Unfortunately, like I said, there's a lot of performative
Yeah.
commentary, and at the moment, a lot of people are being very emotional
Mm-hmm.
publicly about issues that they may not feel that emotional about,
Yeah.
because they know if they look emotional, then that they feel like there's a kind of consensus that then that's okay, and whatever. And I know that they feel, I know it's performative, because if people really felt as strongly, in this case, about sexism and sexual abuse, it wouldn't fucking happen. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When, it just wouldn't exist. If people cared this much about racism, it wouldn't exist. So and I think you've just fallen victim of that,
Yeah.
really. And people are looking, and this is not a commentary on you, all right? But if Tez Ilyas had made that comment, I don't know if he'd be kicked out of the comedy collective.
Yeah,
Okay,
because he's a
if
big dog.
fucking, he's in TV shows, right?
Yeah.
If Mo the comedian made that comment, I'm not suggesting he's in the comedy collective. He wouldn't have been part of that. So again, not commenting on
Yeah.
you, but it's just to say people are like, yeah, this is not going to impact my career if I take this
Yeah.
one down, and I can
Yeah.
take them down publicly, and I can wear a
And I
little
can
pin
look
badge,
good, and I
and I
can.
can look good. Maybe the comment should have been deleted. You know what
I
I'm
just
saying?
like, somebody said something
So
interesting to me. They were like,
delete the
if
comment.
the admin had
Fucking hell.
messaged me and been like, "Could you take that down?" I would have been like, "Yeah,
Delete
fine."
the comment. It's not the, especially because Facebook forums. I mean, I dip into Facebook to read messages, and that's it. It's really annoying because when you go online, people can see you. It's like, oh my god.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
genuinely not a huge fan of Facebook. And yeah, I'm gonna go back. It's actually shame it's deleted, because that would have been a good way to burn up some time with those comments. I
Oh,
mean, it's
I can send you screen. I've got a lot of screenshots of
oh
people
no, I don't do
debating my
screenshots. I
validity.
can't.
Yeah, that's okay.
Just,
That's okay.
my brain
But
just goes.
it was the closest I felt to doing a gig since lockdown started, because it was 100 people paying attention to me. Do you know what I mean? I was like, this is sick.
and it's just making. I mean, I'm not going to suggest that was bad judgment. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's but a lapse of judgment does not a bad person make. And
I
it's
think a lot
about,
of the Sorry, go on. I'm being interrupting.
no, I went to loads too. It's and I think in in this climate where we all care a lot about issues, we are perhaps sometimes caring too much about the things that are really easy for us. Oh, we could have a go at this guy, but you know, like I said earlier, you're going to have a go at the really important guys. You know,
it's a recurring theme where something happens, a comedian makes a joke about it, and like when people make a joke about pedophilia, it's like, how dare you joke about that? And it's like, well, you're not shouting this loud at the people that are fucking creating the systems that are allowing this to happen.
Well, I'll tell you something really funny. I did something with a somewhat famous comedian online, and it was recorded on Zoom and put out. And what happened was, this guy who I often meet really famous comedians and work with them, they're not very fun. Sadly, and maybe that I meet you on bad days. And this pretty famous comedian made a joke about paedophilia. It was about basically fancying like a cartoon baby or something. It was really like, and I got very short attention, so I'd been distracted, and I just heard his punchline, and I just looked at the camera like, you know, my instant reaction was, that's just, why would you say this? So I'm saying all this to make the point that people make paedophilia jokes all the time. This guy, quite famous, quite well known, you know, and he's doing it, you know, and what he said has probably made the cut, and it's probably out on YouTube somewhere. And my look and they told me they was going to cut and just look out and make a gif out of it. You know, so what I'm saying is like I'm just repeating what you said. There's literally paedophilia jokes left, right, and centre in the fucking comedy industry. You know, so if you've got a problem with that joke, get out of the industry.
Yeah, but it's this thing about like, comedians are like an easy. It's almost like you explode that idea that you had about like attacking the small guy that's not going to affect you. If you're outside of comedy and you see a comedian make a joke about racism, but not necessarily a racist joke, you go, how dare you, da, 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 and it's like, because they don't think that's a topic that is to be joked about. So they attack the comedian because that won't affect them in any way. Whereas if they went to their boss and were like, hey, why aren't there more black people on the board of executives in this company? Then they're a problem, and it'll affect their actual livelihood. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. We fight the battles we think we'll win, sadly. And that's can be, and we waste a lot of time doing that.
Yeah.
But I'll just say what I said before. If all this noise was meaningful, we wouldn't be in the place we are now.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, I'm not particularly sad you're out of that Facebook group. You're not.
No, I'm back in. I haven't told anyone, but I am back in. I don't really, like, it's no use to me, but I like the drama.
I guess no. I used to go into it all the time. Like, it's just it's really a time thing that I don't go into Facebook groups anymore. And they were like, what happened? They set rival groups got set up. Yeah. You know, names of which I forget. So there's all these like rival ones or whatever. But I don't know. I would say, even though I have said earlier that every industry is the same. I've worked in the civil service. I've worked in the private sector. I've worked in local government. I've worked everywhere, and like, you know, you get the same kind of climate of racism and sexism, blah blah blah. I would say that in comedy, I think people are so keen to be part of the village. They just love to talk about, you know, because it makes them feel part. Well, this is my view as a comedian. This is my view. This is my view as this. This is my view as that. And really, they're all still, you know, that it's just. I think it is a way of people ingratiating themselves. A, with a cause they're not doing much to further, but B, with an industry they probably don't have as much as a foothold in as they would like. And it's just a way of kind of, but I'm important. My thing got 20,000 comments, or this, and that noise can be. I mean, I found that noise quite stressful, to be honest, which is probably why I don't use Facebook so much. I think comedians need to calm down, don't we? Just need to chill out a bit.
My mate Aaron's like literally shouts down the phone at me. He's like, "You're a fucking court jester. Would you ever just chill out?" Just.
We overestimate our importance a lot, sadly, you know, because we're important to each other. Yeah. But we're not that outside of that.
It's like Dave Chappelle might change my life with a special, but he's like, you know, like and Dave Chappelle's Dave Chappelle, and it's like we are fucking London based kind of comedians. And look, some of us might shoot off into the stratosphere, and we all hope that we become this influential voice that can
Yeah.
use their comedic platform to get across the messages outside of comedy that we want to get across. Will that happen for 99.9% of us? Absolutely not. There's 14.7 thousand people in that group. I'd say 2 of them will reach any kind of status where they can get serious points across. And one of
Yeah.
those will be outed as a nonce. And then
Yeah, our chances of success are quite low, let's face it.
yeah.
You know, and we know that. That's why we participate in the village. It's a village,
Yeah.
you know, and you need to, every now and again, you do need to have that helicopter where you get way far above it, and you think, oh, there's all this other stuff that I need.
Well, it's so funny that people kept messaging me being like, oh my God, are you okay? And I was like, because I got kicked out of the comedy collective, and I'm like, yeah, there's a global pandemic on. Like,
the world is on fire.
Like,
yeah,
I don't get, no one outside of this group cares about me getting kicked out of that group, and half the people inside the group don't care. So it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it's a very necessary group, I think, for comedy, particularly London-based comedians. And I remember getting a lot of gigs from there.
Yeah.
You know, I remember when I started comedy, being told to join it to get gigs, and it was very, you know, you get gigs from there. People advertise gigs, you get them. But it's not a forum of any kind of intellectual debate. Like, it's not a progressive place where any problems are going to be solved. And I would suggest any place with 14,000 wannabe comedians is not a place where you would find anything of worth, of intellectual or academic value.
Yeah.
Or it's not at all.
Yeah, no,
it's a bucket full of crabs.
It's
and you know, we're all just trying to climb out of it. So having said that, I've, you know, in comedy, even like yourself, I've met some of the best people in my life in comedy.
Yes.
Like, I've met friends for life.
Wonderful people.
You know, yeah. So that's not to say like universally comedians are awful people, but there is, you know, you know, I don't know what the collective noun is for comedians, but like there's those kind of groups.
Yeah.
You know, it would
Well, it's what you said. You get to put because it's open. All you have to do to be a comedian is talk into a microphone and attempt to make people laugh. The art form is just talking into a microphone. So anyone who has ever done that goes, as a comedian, I think this, and you go,
yeah, and that's the only place where that comment gets kind of validated. But
yeah,
there are other more professional spaces where that comment is like,
yeah, it'd be like, what?
Yeah. That's, and I was always really conscious of that. I've always conscious of that. That's why I said it took me a long time before I was always someone doing comedy. I never said I was a comedian for a long time.
Yeah,
and I think that's a fair thing to do. And even now, like, I haven't performed stand up for a long time. I don't know what I'm going to do first time I step on the stage again and hold the mic.
I'm going to cry.
That's not really going to get the audience to trust you. You better not do any kind of anti-English jokes if you cry as your opener, because they're not going to trust you enough to laugh at all that stuff. So, you know, if you do that, then do your whale jokes.
Yeah, my whale jokes.
Yeah. No, it'll be good. I mean, I obviously have like massive imposter syndrome, but I definitely feel like a comedian now, and I do miss it. And I just feel like as long as we earn that right, and as long as we continue to keep working, so we make sure we don't lose that right, then that's all we can do. So good luck to everybody that wants to earn the right to be a comedian.
I think there'll be a lot of them post-pandemic. A lot of people will go, oh, I need to do something with my life now that I'm left out of the house, and we'll get a lot of new open micers, I think.
Well, what's going to happen to the circuit, man? There might not be a circuit for them. So
I don't know. I have little schemes. I'm going to Edinburgh because I have family there, so it doesn't cost me to stay there. I'm going in August, and I'm gonna do a show up a tree or something like that. It's good.
Yeah, why not, man? Yeah, it's the sad. There doesn't seem to be a lot of it because we don't. Obviously, we've got like the new what's it called? The comedy
LCA.
What is it? It stands for
Live Comedy Association.
Live Comedy Association. Yes, LCA, and there's Equity, and I guess the Writers Guild are kind of thinking about it, but there doesn't seem to be any kind of executive level strategizing about the circuit and what it's going to look like. And that's because the circuit's so disparate. It's just individual people doing their thing. Yeah. And that, as a project manager, I generally think this is going to be, you know, when lockdown is over, and properly, and social distancing is over, like, I don't know what plans we have in place to start that ending up again. I don't know. Other than the
Yeah.
big clubs. So the big clubs will be fine because the Glee will have
Yes,
had
because
some kind of
they're
plan. Yeah, comedy stores have to stand. All them ones will have some kind of plan. But all
and they'll
the
have had insurance. Like you look at somewhere like Top Secret, like they're renovating the toilets. They're a bit like, okay, see you when this is all over, and they're just like, fine. You know what I mean?
yeah. So it's will there be an open mic circuit to go back to? Because you run a show, for example. So how does that work?
Yeah,
What
I've kind of been chatting to the bar that I run it in and been like, what? And they're like, we don't know
it's
whether we'll
literally not.
have budget or whether we'll have this. And I think comedy is like unstoppable on a level where it'll build up again. It might take a little while to have all these for pubs to have money again to pay people, or even like when pubs are open social distantly, it's like their separate function room might now be spillover to get more people in spread out. So
Mm.
you can't like use that as a comedy room or whatever. But I think there's something about the simplicity of comedy means it will never die and not come back. I think.
I predict Zoom open mic going onto Zoom because I've done quite a lot of
God,
Zoom.
I
I
haven't
don't
done
mind
any.
it.
I
Have you not
haven't
done
done
any?
any.
It's all
No,
right,
no, no.
No, no, no. So when lockdown started, I did a couple of Zoom gigs and I was like, this is awful. I can't do them. And just past couple of weeks, I would say 2 or 3 weeks, I've just done more. And I
Yeah.
think what happened was at the beginning, people didn't know how to set them up. So they
Yes.
were pretty dead and no one knew how to use the technology and it was all done on Instagram Live or whatever. So now I've done a few that have worked great. So if
Yeah.
I offered a Zoom gig, I would take it because I genuinely think that the open mic circuit is going to move to Zoom.
Yeah. And
I really,
I've heard that
yeah.
like there will be positives to come of this. I have a friend, John, who he has two brothers and they're both blind, and he's like has a few kind of disabled mates and from like their schooling system and that whole thing, and he's like, these guys are fucking loving it because they haven't seen this much live stand up in their entire lives because everything's online. So I think even club gigs, places like the Comedy Store and Top Secret, I think they'll, like Hot Water have announced yesterday, they're like, we are now going to stream our shows and you'll pay a subscription to be able to watch it from home if you
It's
want.
really amazing. Comedy is one of the least accessible art forms out there. Not just in terms of being differently abled, but like if you're a parent, it's massive. I could not have become a
Yes.
comedian if I'd had my daughter 5 years ago.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a nightmare getting out the house, paying for childcare, doing Zoom gigs. I don't want to do an open mic gig, but I'll do it on Zoom.
Yeah,
Do you know
because
what I
you
mean?
don't
I
have to
don't
leave
want
the
to go.
house.
I put my daughter to bed and I come downstairs and I do my comedy. It's
It is
honestly,
cool. Yeah.
because people have learned how to do it now, it does work
Yeah.
quite well on Zoom. So that's my prediction for at least the open mic circuit, and I hope
Yeah.
that it plays out because that's such a good point. It's far more accessible, and one of the things that's really hard about the open mic circuit is you travel quite a lot.
Yeah.
To stand up in front of people, do a new, it's a lot of energy. Now I could just be like, oh, bin, keep, and I've just sat in my house in
Yeah.
front of my
And
minutes.
you have like dinner on the
It's
stove while you're doing it, and you do your 10 minutes and then you
it's
go finish.
great, and also opportunities for things like I'd like to work with more people who maybe haven't thought about doing comedy, but like have been put off for all kinds of reasons. And now it's like, oh, I don't need to hire a room anymore. I
Mm.
don't need to find a time where everyone can get to a certain place or whatever. There's like so many opportunities for people who want to maybe kind of do their own little things to kind
Hmm.
of, I've got, for me, I'd love to get more black women doing kind of more comedy. I'd love to get more parents involved. I'd love
Yeah.
to get older people involved. It's very much a domain of kind of like, graduates and like younger people, which is fine. But you do need, the heart of my comedy is the fact that I've done so much, like my sitcom is a workplace sitcom about where I've worked, a lot of my comedy is about things I've done over the past 15 years, I guess. So that's valuable. And yet it's in the old style of stand up, that was a very difficult world to break into if you're like
Yeah.
over 35, maybe 40 or 50, because it's for lots of reasons. So Zoom's a really opportunistic thing. I'm looking forward to that
Mm.
hopefully becoming a staple part of the life.
I think it's become much more normalized in general life.
Mm.
But This has been fantastic.
Yeah, we've been chatting for ages, man. I was
Yeah.
looking at time, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yo, you might have to edit this.
No.
Just cut that shit and stick it
It,
out.
it won't be it still won't be the longest one
No
though.
one's good. No, oh, what's the longest one?
Maybe 3 hours.
Yeah,
Which is
that's
long. It's
that's
maybe
long.
too long. I think that one is too long. I'll be honest.
Who was it?
It was a pair of mates of mine who
Oh, there's
run
3 of you. Yeah.
and they run a theater company, and they're very chatty. But it's good. It is long.
I'm just glad that I'm glad I'm not your longest, and that'd be quite embarrassing.
Yeah, that's but thank you so much for coming on. This will come out on Friday.
All good, man.
So I will do the outro, but thank you. I'll just hit stop recording and then.
Cool.
And that was episode 65 of the Good Guy podcast. I hope you really fucking enjoyed it. I did. I just recorded it earlier today. So I am really pleased with how that went. I hope you enjoyed it. I assume if you've made it this far, it was a bit of a long episode, but you've gained something from it. You had a good time. You found it engaging and entertaining. So I hope that you like the video. Do the little thumbs up on YouTube. Give it a 5-star review on iTunes. Subscribe on Spotify and iTunes. And jump on Patreon if you fancy. www.patreon.com/Vittorio Angelone. And again, if you don't already follow me on Instagram and Twitter for the good laughs and videos and sketches and all that kind of crack. Vittorio Angelone on Instagram, that Vittorio on Twitter. The aim in life is to the 2 accounts that use @Vittorio with no addendums and no last name on Instagram and Twitter are both pretty inactive. So the dream is to just nab those, but for now it's that Vittorio and Vittorio Angelone on Twitter and Instagram respectively. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Good Guy Podcast. I recommend you go check out other episodes and check out all the videos on this channel because they're great and I put a lot of effort into this YouTube channel. And if you're on iTunes, other episodes, just to have a punt, see if you can find a name that you recognize. I've had some pretty big names on here, so have a scroll through the episodes and see what else you fancy. But you're fantastic. Come back again. This has been the Good Guy Podcast, and at the end of the Good Guy Podcast, we say, up the fucking good guys. I'll catch you next week, folks. See you later.